Hello and welcome to a Taylor's Tales podcast. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and we're back this time with Ollie Deacon again for part two of, yes, that's right, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. I have the extended edition in my hand right now on screen for those not lucky enough to see our beautiful faces on screen right now, or just listening via audio because you can't be bothered to see our faces. It's a two-way street. We've got the Return of the King in my hand, and Ollie, how excited are you for the final part of The Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, very excited. I'm excited to get through it as well, because it's we spent what has it been, 90 days on this now, like 3 months. So it'd be good to get through it and get onto the next set of films, whatever they're going to be. Trudge
our way through. we're ready to get to that point, mate. Yeah, 100%.
Definitely.
And as we were talking about before the podcast, starting straight off, we saw the wolf's head, or as you said, Grog. Is it Grog?
Grond.
Grond.
They named it after the hammer that Morgoth used when he used to fight. So it's Grond, Hammer of the Underworld, which is quite cool. Quite a good name.
That is a killer name. I didn't even know that. For those listening right now, that fact you should hold that in your minds. That's a cool fact. Morgoth's hammer from the underworld.
Hammer of the Underworld, yeah. I mean, if there's anything that Tolkien was absolutely brilliant at, it is naming things or places or people.
That's really very true. And he provides a lot of terminology throughout this that does refer to sort of different mythologies, like Norse gods and different sorts of, even some Greek references from time to time when it comes down to how there's many gods within the Lord of the Rings. There's many sort of beings that are of the higher power.
That's definitely a good way to look at it, actually, because obviously in Greek mythology you have the place where the gods reside is Mount Olympus, and obviously which is inaccessible to mere mortals, and obviously in Middle Earth, in the world, in Tolkien's mythology, you have Middle Earth, which is where the mortals reside, and then you have Valinor, which is where the immortals reside. So that's quite cool, actually. It's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, man. I to be honest, I love Greek mythology just as much as I love talking about Lord of the Rings, because they're such relatable gods, and I think this is the same with Lord of the Rings in the sense that you have Sauron and you have Morgoth, and even though they are pure evil in any way, shape, or form, there's a sort of relatability as there is with Satan within Christian beliefs as well. It's where there's this like fall, and Sauron and Morgoth have this sort of like, well, if I'm not going to have all the power, then I'm not going to be part of the boys club, and I'm leaving you guys now, sort of thing. It's obviously it's not that simple, but it is definitely. We can relate to them in that way. I've gone on a tangent there, I know.
That's fair. That's it. Tangents are what we specialize in, so that's fine.
Exactly. And you know what? Let's jump right in first off, and we've got straight off the mark. As we said, the wolf's head, Grond, and thank you for correcting me on that. It's hammered through the gate, and even though in part one we see that as the last scene, it's not continued into part two. We actually start with, and I was kind of like, where's the continuation here, Peter Jackson? We have Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stood at the river waiting for the pirates or the Sayer ships.
Yeah.
And there's not like a lot of meaning in these first couple of scenes until we see Frodo. But I do like the fact that we still have these multiple sort of, how would I put it, stories being combined into one. So it is, you've got to give credit to Peter Jackson where it's due. He's merging all of these multiple stories into, a short, in our case, it's 4 hours for the extended edition, but for 3 hours in the movie when you originally saw it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's got all these narratives that are, they've got to be interwoven somehow before the end of the film. And he does it very well. And he's obviously, it's easy to think that he's got the book to go by, but the films are out of order in a sense with the book anyway.
Yes.
And so he had to kind of do it by himself, but he did a great job, I think.
Yeah. Really, and I haven't got a lot written down for that scene, but it is funny just seeing Gimli mess with Legolas as their friendship blossoms, and they sort of just start like messing about even more, in the sense that Legolas meant to fire a warning shot, and it kills one of the Sayer pirates straight off the mark.
Yeah, there's just no messing around anymore, is there? Gimli just
It's
wants it.
like,
He's
and you
itching for a
notice that,
battle.
don't you? In the battles that come, all three of them, even Aragorn becomes a little bit savage, where there's just like, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, one after another. If we did a kill count, it would just become out of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'd just be seeing ding, 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 ding in the top right-hand corner when those three are on screen.
Definitely.
Madness.
Yeah. So there's a bit in the books where the ships are described as having black sails with, I forget how it is now, but it's like they have black sails with a red star on it, and it's like it's supposed to be like a bastardization of the ship that the men of Numenor used to have. And so the men of Numenor used to have like the same kind of sigil, not exactly the same.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
But it was a pure silver star rather than red, and so it's like the men of the men in the Corsair ships that are, it's like a middle finger, basically. That's what it seemed like to me.
Oh, I like that because that symbol's a nice little bit of Sauron's sigil, in the sense that he's full of corruption. This is a corrupt ship, and we've taken something pure like the men of Numenor's silver, and we've made it black and bleak. I like that. That's some serious. That was like your description of the city of Gondor. Sorry, not the city of Gondor, but Minas Tirith in the last podcast. It's got that sort of. The more you describe stuff from the book, the more we can relate to the movie and really, delve deeper into it. So that's really useful. I like that. Because I don't have a lot. We've got the ghosts, as we call them, or the dead men, who just immediately are a little bit of an OP power to be played by Aragorn. Let's be honest. Let's be straight out there.
They're a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because it did look like they were going to lose. But in the book, when Aragorn and his crew arrive, they don't have a host of the dead with them. It's just Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. And then I think there's about 6 other rangers of the Dunedain with them. And that's basically it. And they don't necessarily save the day, but they obviously have a big hand in actually winning the battle. But it is actually Rohan that effectively saved Gondor, which is quite good in the book. So yeah.
They do have. I think that's kind of underrated in the movie. Yeah, that's really well put, because Rohan almost feels like they're about to lose if they don't have the ghosts come in and effectively help overhaul the battle.
Yeah, definitely.
Now that I've said that, I don't want to skip ahead too far, but at the same time, do you know in the books, because I haven't read these in years since I was a kid, whether the Oliphaunts are a feature? Like, is that?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
That's quite a battle to overturn. Now I'm thinking about that. That's quite a
certainly with horses as well. To fight against, I don't know how big the elephants are supposed to be on screen, but let's say they're 100 feet high, they're pretty big, and to defeat them with spears and bows and arrows, it's pretty good. It's good going. That's the strength of the relationship between the men of Rohan and their horses, because they're known as the horse lords. So yeah,
it's
there's no horses in Gondor. There was. I could be wrong here. I could be remembering it wrong, but I'm pretty certain there is a line that basically says that the army of Gondor doesn't have a mounted, group or battalion, whatever it is. So.
Which makes Faramir's sacrifice in the previous movie even more, sort of gargantuan when you think about it. Because if you don't ride a horse and you're riding to Osgiliath, that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? It's like, you guys don't ride horses and yet you're riding to your death. Good luck with that. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Anyway, on to the next scene, which is in my opinion, the first proper scene because of part 2. Because it's so short, the Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas sort of first bit, and this is where I think there's a lot to dive into. Is Gollum leads Frodo to Shelob's lair, and to me, I don't know about you, Ollie, but this to me is Frodo's first proper underworld scene where he's on his own. He doesn't have anyone else there. to attack, because previously when he's gone into the underworld, he's had Aragorn, he's had Boromir, you know, when he went to Moria, and then in the Two Towers he had Sam or Faramir, and so it's quite interesting to see this tunnel scene where he's on his own for the first time.
Definitely, and it's quite creepy as well, because it's like he's gone in under the leadership, so to speak, of this creature that is definitely not trustworthy. That he knows is going to try and kill him at some point, and so he's obviously got that in the back of his mind. But then obviously he's got these, you know, these dark tunnels, you can't see anything, that has loads of spider webs all around and like dead bodies and stuff. It's like that would be pretty terrifying to be there.
Yeah, for someone who's only ever like experienced the Shire to all have this all at once sort of flipped on him, you think to yourself, that's an immense amount of bravery to even want to look into there. And I think the line he says is, "Now that I'm here, I don't think I want to go in." And I agree. I wouldn't want to go in either if I was there. Like 100%.
Definitely. But then again, it is the kind of a mark of a hero who ventures into the, you know, Jordan Peterson puts it, going into the dragon's lair and getting the gold.
Yes.
And so it's obviously going to be scary to do that. But he does it somewhat successfully. So yeah.
So, yeah, I like the emphasis on somewhat there. Yeah, we'll get to that. And so I do think that when he says, "I can't go back," I've got this written down here, is that the mission, like you've said with the hero, is more important than the hero's life. And you've talked about this before in the sense that Frodo's aware that his life will end with the finishing of this mission. And I think that he's sort of on a suicide run where he just wants to just get to the end, almost, in the sense that his life is meaningless in the conquest to destroy the ring, and he starts to seriously realize this by the end of this film.
Yeah, I think he starts to realize. Is it in? I think when is it that we cut to Galadriel sort of telepathically communicating with Elrond?
Very close. Yes,
she says that Frodo is becoming aware that the quest is going to claim his life, and he's obviously not happy about that. And I think that as the realization dawns on him, he becomes weaker because of it.
Yes.
But he still carries on because obviously he has to. There is an element that's like the greater good is often used as like a tool to control society at large. Just to go off on another tangent here. But he has voluntarily, no one has ordered him to do this. He's undertaken it voluntarily. He put his hand up and said, "I will do this," when virtually nobody was actually willing to say, "Yeah, I'll do this," because they all understood the risk. Maybe there's a little bit of naivety in there, but he pretty soon woke up when Gandalf died, and he realised he had to leave the Fellowship because otherwise they would all die. And it's like it's the individual choice to undertake whatever, I don't know, death you will eventually go to. It has to be your own choice. And so I think that because of that, because he made that initial choice freely, he has the strength to sort of continue even when it appears to be completely and utterly hopeless, which it basically is. It basically is completely hopeless. He is, yeah, like I said, to repeat the point, he doesn't know he is going to die.
Yeah, and all the more so when we step into Shelob's lair, where there's webs and dead things on the floor, and Gollum's little voice in the background going, "Yes, go further into the tunnels, my precious." And it's just like, you know, it's just his voice echoes all across the tunnels, and it just gets scarier. I remember as a 7-year-old kid watching this. I think I was 7 years old, and that was terrifying. Watching Frodo step into a tunnel and hearing this skulking sort of Gollumous creature run away and basically leave him in the darkness.
Definitely. Yeah.
So all the more courage for doing so, like you say.
Absolutely, and then obviously we get to, so he's gone in. He has no guide because his guide has just run off, and he's also kicked or shooed away his sort of ideal, if you like. So he's completely on his own, doesn't know up and down, and then he meets the dragon, the serpent of chaos that is
Yes.
obviously in spider form in this particular cave. Yeah, Shelob, and that would be. It's a good little cinematic moment when he's sort of fallen back, and you can tell that he's almost like shrinking, like I don't know where to go now. And then and he's got the light, what is it, the light of Erendil?
Elendil, yeah.
And so that's providing a little bit of light. And then obviously we see in the background the spider just is actually already there, and then it just sort of moves very slowly and silently. That's good. It's a good, yeah, very well done.
And more than that, it's like if he hadn't, this is something that I thought, and this is a silly thought, but like if he hadn't, said Kalima and lit the light of Elendil, would the spider have awoken? I'm sure it would have, but like, you know what I mean? Like it's just sort of actions provoke consequences, and it's very similar to how Bilbo awoke the dragon by entering the lair. What would have happened if he hadn't entered the lair, sort of thing. It's
yeah, definitely.
It's nice,
definitely.
sort of not a juxtaposition, but a dichotomy of the two of them, of this pure light and this spider, like you say, of serpent of chaos. And I think within that scene there, I think I'm right in saying that Galadriel, there is a little sort of flashback to the.
Oh, there is, yeah. And she is that before or after he lights it up? I can't remember now.
Oh no, I've just remembered. There's no flashback here. There's her voice at the back of his head.
Yeah, and there's a little because he falls over, doesn't he?
He does.
And then all of a sudden he's in Loria. It's like, yeah, it's obviously not a flashback. It's like a sort of a semi hallucination, I suppose.
Yes.
I suppose she kind of appears. So I suppose it's another anima figure, actually, isn't it? Because he's in a state of pretty severe psychological distress, and he doesn't know what to do, and then the anima appears and gives him something of a direction. I suppose you could look at it like that. Yeah,
I think you're right. I think that the fact that he's just had to tumble and fight his way through, he gets caught up in webs. He's like slashing his way through these like disgusting sort of, like you said, the Dragon's Cave. He's going through, instead of gold, he's going through the worst, darkest cobwebs of the mind in this case. And you could consider it the darkness resembles the darkest part of what Frodo's got to tackle in order to destroy the ring. And he fights Gollum, and he has that little sort of scuffle with him where he realizes that at this point Frodo doesn't realize that he's being betrayed by Gollum at the moment. He has an idea, but he's not fully aware of it, and or maybe he's just trying to persuade himself that he's not totally dark and therefore Gollum's not totally dark.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. He's trying to remind himself that I think he knows that he will become something like Gollum in a sense, and he's just trying to sort of trick himself into believing that it's not all bad. But which is true. It's not all bad, but but Gollum he's so far gone that there's basically no coming back.
Exactly.
His life is entirely bound to the ring, and so he doesn't want to. He wants to die because he doesn't like it. He hates his life, but he doesn't want to be without the ring, and that is the stronger will, if you like. That's the stronger force for Gollum, and so
And Frodo says this nice line in that sort of interaction where he says, "I've got to destroy the ring for both of us," and it's that realization, like, he understands that there's that tie to the ring here, and that he's got that connection. And Gollum's immediate reaction is, "I hate you. I'm going to attack you from there," and basically get flipped over into the abyss, which is a nice, another nice cinematic sort of representation of what Frodo's planning to do will happen to Gollum. It's a nice sort of hint, maybe, of what's yet to come.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's a good scene. I like it.
Yeah, it is, definitely. And it moves on to, from there, like we said, the Galadriel scene, where Frodo's so tired of having to wrestle with the darkness that he's now having to, he wants some sort of light. And is, obviously, if you're in that sort of situation, you're so tired and exhausted that hallucinogen just kicks in.
Yeah, yeah, like a little like a mini DMT trip almost,
Yes.
just because of the sheer stress of the situation. Yeah, it'd be hard to deal with, definitely.
Yes, stress levels. I think
Yeah,
I'm surprised he doesn't have some sort of like her just like
like a
amnesia
heart
from
attack or something.
yeah, yeah. All of the above, basically, all of the above.
Yeah, yeah.
And Galadriel is the purest of white light, so it makes sense to have her appear in this scene. And Kate Blanchett does this beautiful sort of handout. This is the support that he needs because he's no longer got Sam, and so it's this. I need my ideal. I need my ideal to give me help in this scenario. And the only help he gets is from a rock, basically, where he puts his hand on the rock.
Yeah, definitely. It's just a little push is all he needs, really. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I'm going to bring up another questionable point, something that we're going to see repeated in this part of the film, that and it comes up quite topically throughout. So I'm going to ask you here. So when Frodo gets stabbed by Shelob, which we see in immediately after this hallucination,
Yeah.
why does he get stabbed? Because surely he'd be wearing his mithril.
Cinematic error.
Cinematic error, because
Yeah.
what do we see later throughout the film?
Yeah, because it's a prominent feature, isn't it? In when he gets caught, is the shiny shirt. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe he gets stabbed in the leg or something like that. Maybe she knows what he's wearing. Or...
We never see where he gets stabbed, but I thought when I watched it, it's a fun thing to think about. Is that hang on a minute? Didn't we have a scene in the first film where he gets stabbed and he has this whole encounter?
Yeah, it was like a big thing, wasn't it?
Come on, Peter.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
think it through.
I mean,
anyway.
it's not explicitly mentioned in the book either. So,
yes.
Obviously Tolkien just assumed the reader would put two and two together, that he wasn't stabbed anywhere where the mithril was covering. So
there you go. Well, if Tolkien did it, then you're forgiven, Peter. You're forgiven. Yeah. So I have got written down here, even Gollum fears Shelob, which says a lot, really, because you see his face throughout that, and his sort of fear does represent what the viewer should be feeling. I think it's nice to see that. And you've also got, if you do not find a way, no one will, said by Galadriel, which I think it's emphasizing what we said earlier, where, Frodo's aware that he needs to complete this mission.
Yeah, definitely, and he needs to. I expect he needs to find an ideal, a map reference at some point, so that he can carry on. Yeah.
And from there, that's the end of that sort of first chunk, because it just gets cut as soon as Frodo gets stabbed. Sort of, we don't see the wrapping up within this scene. We see it later on. Shelob, we see it later on, and we see Sam later on in the film, because there's so many different stories going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And we got a nice little extra scene here, which I didn't remember from the original movie, which is nice. And I think this should have been kept in the original movie because it's got quite an impact, I think. And it's the conversation between Eowyn and Merry just before going to Gondor. The Rohirrim sort of camp is stopping to just have a break from riding. And Eowyn and Merry have a conversation, and Merry says something along the lines that he understands the state of the world, and that even though he's a hobbit and he can't do anything about it, he'll fight for his friends and he'll do what he can, even though the world is in chaos. I think he's quite summed up everyone's part in this whole movie, and maybe even real life as well, in the sense that even though he may not have a great impact, he still tries his best to do something, at least, to help friends. I
don't actually remember. I haven't seen the original length film I've probably since it came out, pretty much.
Yeah.
Since I discovered the extended version, I haven't seen them. So I'd actually forgotten that. Is that when he's like sat on a log or something and he's like eating a sandwich?
Exactly. Spot on, mate. Spot on.
So is that scene? Is it different then in the extended?
So no, that's in the extended. It's not in the original.
Right. Okay. Fine. Yeah. So it's his. He's saying, he's had this call to adventure, and he's not going to ignore it because his friends are. His friends, obviously, like social connections and stuff. Friends it's life, isn't it? There isn't much more outside of human contact that's really. There is for some, but really worth living for. It's friends and family. It's the. Well, I know I would say so anyway.
I think you summed it up there, mate. It's something that is missing in today's society because of the current situation is what you're describing, and I thought it was very relevant, and I thought that scene, maybe it's more relevant today than it was when the film was released back in 2003, but I think it has a real impact on how people can look at life, in the sense that you may not have an impact on the whole war or whole battle, but doing the best you can has an impact on your friends and family. And so I really like that between Merry and Eowyn. And then they immediately head off to fight for Minas Tirith because they become aware that the lower floors of Minas Tirith have been taken. So they're aware of an event that hasn't happened yet that we haven't seen. So it's quite a foreshadowing of what's yet to come. And now, finally, we get back to what we thought first saw at the end of part one, where the wolf's head, Grond, comes in and smashes through the door. And we've talked about the symbology of that, and I love the fact that you brought up the fact of it being the Warhammer. That's so cool. But the flames, it's like it's the newborn age of the orc smashing into the world of men when it barges through the door, and Gandalf says, "Whatever comes through that door, you will stand your ground."
Well, it's the first thing he says is, "You are soldiers of Gondor."
Yes,
it's just reminding them who they are. They are men of the city of the men of Numenor. You know what I mean? It's like they are part of living history, and the city they live in means so much more than just the stone that it's made of.
Yes.
And you have a duty or an oath of some sort to defend this city that you and your family live in. It's good. I like that word, that line. It's not in the book. I've got the passage written here, but we'll come to that in a second. We'll come to that in a second because it's linked to another scene later on. But it's reminding them, this is who you are. This is what you were. I don't know, not necessarily what you were born to do, but this is what you swore you would do. If ever there was an enemy at the gates, you were going to stand and not let them in.
Yes. And when you're on the brink of death, you do need something higher purpose, some sort of higher guard to say to people to get them to stand and fight. And Gandalf seems to repeatedly do that throughout these films, even when he's Gandalf the Grey or even Gandalf the White. So it is really kind of epic to see him do that using his ability to speak. And it does bring back that idea that a wizard's words are their great power, not their staff, not their sword. It's how they speak and how they move forward. And as you said with Tolkien, he uses symbology and he uses words in a way that we don't see very often when it comes down to literature. And so these sentences that we hear, even though some of them aren't in the book, they are representative of what Peter's trying to sort of, I think, represent when it comes down to Tolkien's way of speaking.
Definitely, yeah. He's trying to represent the sort of the majesty and the splendor to the story that's being played out, and how important it is.
It is really important, and from there we see something just. I thought this symbology, right? That was. I'm sure you spotted this as well. So Faramir is being taken off. He's being taken on a stretcher by Dennithor, his father, to the sort of realm of old kings to be burned with his father. And as Pippin's watching them walk with with Dennithor and Faramir to the tomb, we see the white tree, and we see within the white tree a flower blossoming. And it's so interesting to see this, because I think to myself that Faramir is still alive. And so it's like there's still hope. This flower has blossomed from the dead white tree. And what we saw in the previous film with the burning white tree hasn't happened yet. So there's still that hope that I think it's Elrond says that there isn't any left when he's talking to Eowyn. And I wanted to see if you'd seen that, if you'd recognized that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think what happens is when Aragorn finally accepts the responsibility that he has, which is to become king, even though he doesn't want it, and he's never wanted it, and so on and so forth. It signals that it's like the. What am I trying to say here? It's like there is some magic to action in this universe. Yes. So when Aragorn accepts, okay, this is how it's going to be, it's like that change in him, it's like it reverberates throughout the entire world, and the tree in Gondor kind of knows that that's what's happened, and so then it's like there's new hope. It's hopefully going to be a new kingdom, and so it's like the ground is somehow been renewed and is now fertile again for new life, something like that. Yeah,
I totally agree, and I think that Aragorn's impact as a sort of character, obviously he plays such a big role, and I do love the fact that even though he's not there in person, he still has an effect on this small part of the scene, and I think that it's the idea that even though they're taking Faramir off to be burned alive, there's that still small, chance that something good can come of it, basically.
Definitely, yeah.
And Dennithor says something funny as well. He says, "Better to die now than die later," basically. As well. It's just like such a Dennithor thing to say. You're just like, God, you're a depressing person, aren't you, to have around the party?
Yeah, the ultimate nihilist is somehow the head of the kingdom.
It's true.
Like how that's not going to go well, is it?
It's like, flee for your lives. I love it. So good. Yeah, and then from there it skips. It says we'll burn like the heathen kings of old. I thought that was interesting, because I thought to myself, like, it relates back to what we've said in previous podcasts about the previous line of kings were lesser men. And
yeah, the line of stewards were lesser men. The line of kings was obviously broken with the Isildur, but yeah, the people who took over they just went up to scratch.
Yes.
And maybe it's because men have such a short life, and obviously the kings of old had a far longer life, and so they had a lot longer to sort of accrue worldly wisdom and then pass it on to their sons. But the life of a man is too short to really do that, and because they didn't. I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't pass on, the ancient law. They just kind of left it in the books and expected the next person to just pick it up. Yes. Something like that. I don't know. Maybe yeah.
Well, it does make sense why Dennithor is the head of the kingdom when stuff like that's happening in the background.
Yeah, definitely.
And more than that, I also think to myself that the fact that Dennithor is calling them heathens, it doesn't exactly make us think, oh, that line, they're great guys as well.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
It's just silly, isn't it? Because you think about Dennithor and all the things that he's done up to this point, and then he's labeling someone else a heathen. You're just like, those guys probably were better than he was, but jeez.
Yeah, he's going to go out in the same way that they did.
Yeah.
Nihilistically and in flames.
Yeah, that's what Gondor's become, nihilistic, and we then, as I've said at the beginning of this podcast, Peter Jackson does a great way of skipping between scenes. We go immediately from there back to the first level of Minas Tirith, and Gandalf has said to the men of Gondor, whatever comes through that gate, you must stand your ground. Well, he didn't mention cave trolls. And so they come flying through. And there's not just one, because we remember how hard the first one was to kill in Moria. And instead they have 5 attack cave trolls, of which have full armor. And yeah, it's kind of like a slaughter from there on out, because let's be honest, men against such beasts is kind of well, it's not exactly an easy fight, is it?
No, definitely not. But he does shout volley, doesn't he?
He does.
They do shoot a load, and I think you do see one of them fall over as if he's died.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. So obviously the arrows do have some kind of effect. So.
Yeah, exactly. And Gandalf himself kills one of them single-handedly, but we expect that from Gandalf. He's
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
And I love that scene because for me, even though there's not a lot of meaning, it's just there's a fantastic action sequence. There's all of these stunt doubles, and this is the best part of what Peter Jackson did in the first Lord of the Rings, is there was very little CGI and a lot of practical effects. And he just gets loads of New Zealand stunt guys to come in dressed as orcs and just batter these soldiers. And it's brilliant. And they do it perfectly. And they do this sort of, what I would say rugby routine where they, just slam into one another. And even though, we are dissecting a lot of this film, we got to, again, take the action sequences and say, wow, like, it's very hard to create that now, let alone back in 2003.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think CGI has ruined films in a lot of ways because it's made it so expensive to shoot on location and with practical effects now. It obviously does have its advantage, but you can't really beat a battle where it is man on man fighting each other, just hitting each other with rods of metal.
Yeah, exactly. A good comparison may be either Gladiator or Mad Max, Fury Road, where they have a lot of practical effects, and we see the lack of CGI. Again, these are big budget films, so I can't, they have the budget to be able to do that. And Peter at the time had Warner Brothers behind him, so it's this ability to do this. And like you say, ever since Avatar came out in 2009, there was this just everybody does CGI now. We just want to do CGI. Which is sad because I do love a good practical effects scene.
Yeah, definitely.
And from then, we've done this huge, all this action within such a short period of time, and then now we're back to Frodo. He's just been stabbed with, Shelob's tying him up in, cobwebs, and I love Sam's reaction. Get off him, you filth. It's just like, it's just, oh man. What's your first, when you see that, are you like me, you're just like a kid in a candy store, just like, go Sam.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Because Sam is tough, isn't he? He is obviously afraid, but he is like capable of conquering his fear. Yes. And let him go, you filth. It's a good line.
I love hearing
it. He's also holding Sting and the light Erendil.
Yes.
And so it's like maybe in like a mythological sense or a psychological sense, it's like Frodo wasn't adequate for the task, and so another aspect of the psyche rose to the task. And so Sam he's got this sword from an elven kingdom long dead, and he's got that with him, and it's solid, and he can take on the dragon of the underworld and successfully defeat it as well. This gigantic spider, it's like the size of an elephant, and he defeats it with a sword. It's like
it's so true. You made it spot on though. And it's not just like it's a short battle. Sam's being slammed against walls. Like he's having that thingy, stabby thing that the spider has hitting at him all the times. And there's some great sound effects there as well, because it sounds like Shelob's physically there, and you get the clink of its legs and the shriek of it, and Sam hits it in the eye, and I like that. Because it's the idea that darkness has sight, and seeing is the ability to identify and the ability to identify is almost a godly power in these in the sense.
Yeah, definitely. There's probably a kind of an Eye of Horus motif
Yes.
there. I also like the fact that he's been thrown around by the spider, and he doesn't lose any of his pots and pans. He'll stay
I've
attached.
never thought of that. That's such a good point. He doesn't. The home cooking will ever be Sam's thing. He'll forever be able to say, "I'll have a slice of bacon." That's great.
Yeah, it's part of
That's
his
such a good.
personality.
Yeah. You've blown my mind a little bit. I never even thought about that. That's crazy.
I blew my own mind.
I don't know if I can move on now. That's such a like. Physics doesn't happen in Lord of the Rings.
No. There's no need. It doesn't matter.
Zero gravity only. Yeah, that's crazy. I'd never thought of that. Yeah, Sam does say something very poetic after the battle with Shelob, and when he's holding Frodo, he says, "Don't go where I can't follow." And I love that. I think that's such a, it relates to the book in the sense that Sam is very similar age. I think he's a few years younger than Frodo. So he's like the sort of youngster to the equivalent of Bilbo is to sort of Frodo in the sense that they mentor each other.
Yeah, he's not. The age gap isn't quite as significant, but yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Sam was Hamfast Gamgee, that's Sam's father. He was the gardener of Bilbo Baggins at Bag End for most of his life, and he brought Sam along. And so Sam was in part raised by his own dad, but he was also in part raised by Bilbo.
Yes.
And so I think that the mix of the parenting there was very successful. They raised a good kid.
Mate, it's crazy, isn't it? The sense that you've got this get tasks done by his dad, and then at the same time you've got Bilbo who's like, we've got adventures, we've got trolls, we've got dragons, and it's like that ability to build a tough, good old Sam being the reliable one in this story, because he's the most reliable person it seems to be in the entire book series, where he's just trudging along, as we've said.
Yeah, I suppose maybe you could say he's been raised on this sort of ancient lore, the same sort of stories the elves would have. Because Bilbo wrote a lot of songs and stories and stuff about the ancient elven kingdoms and stuff like that. So obviously Sam growing up and knowing them, because in the book, when they leave the Shire, in the very first book, when they leave the Shire, Sam recites I think it's the poem of the fall of Gil-galad, how do you say it? And it's like, it was written in Elvish, and Bilbo translated it into English, or whatever the language would be, the common tongue of men. And Samwise, he knew it off by heart, and so he obviously had this upbringing on mythology and fantasy. But like you said, he was still grounded in the garden, so to speak, and physical labor.
Still got his pots and pans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, still disciplined, because you still have to obviously live, but having maybe his eyes on the clouds, something like that, or eyes on the stars and head and feet on the ground, something like that.
Yeah, that's actually so well put, mate, because at the same time, we've seen throughout, in part one, we said in the previous podcast, where Sam's prepared the amount of rations to go home. So you're right. He's got that groundedness to say, well, here's a solution to be able to get us back. But at the same time, he's looking at the stars, because he's thinking to himself, well, we might be able to get home. There may be the opportunity.
Definitely, yeah.
And we don't see Sam really think against that until right at the end of this film, and that's we'll address that later on. And again, we get another cut scene, and so when the sound of the orcs come and we see the beautiful shining of Sting, we see the blue light lit up, Sam basically runs off and leaves Frodo's classed as dead body, not really dead, but we know that he doesn't, and the orcs come down, and then it just cuts, and then from there we see Pippin chase after Dennithor, and he's like creeping along the little bridge, and he sees that they're taking him into the tomb. And I've got a question: is Dennithor insane? That's the question.
Yes, yeah, he has been turned insane because the Tower of Minas Tirith has a Palantir, and so does the Tower of Barad-dûr. And so basically, a mortal man has been staring into the abyss and has been looking at the devil, and the devil has been whispering to him. And it's been quite a while in the books. It's been like a long time so that he's been slowly turned insane by the voice of Sauron. And yeah, he's completely lost his mind. He's also very old, so he might have some kind of age-related mental disorder, some kind.
Yeah, it could be, or either that, or like you said, the Palantir is, like you said, it is connected. Even though they were meant to just be seeing stones and a way of communicating originally, they were corrupted by Sauron's ability to hand them to like the Witch King, and to the Nazgul, and people basically who are just pure darkness, and obviously Sauron himself. And from that scene, I think Pippin goes in and he says he's not dead. He's not, he says he's not dead, and he gets released from Denethor's service. And it does make me think even further that, like, oh yeah, he's even more insane because he's having reason and facts being thrown at him, and he's still like, no, I want to burn alive anyway. And
yeah, it would take you'd have to be pretty far gone to want to immolate yourself over just dying naturally.
Yes. Yeah.
To think, yeah, dying by fire is better than just maybe even just dying by a spear or by a boar. It's like somehow dying. I suppose in a sense, like, it's his own choice, isn't it? It's his own. He is choosing. I'm going out this way. It's not going to be someone else who forces my hand.
Exactly.
But the madness is that he's taking what you could effectively see as the prince of the land. He's taking him with him, and therefore, if there was no king, let's say Aragorn died in battle, and they still managed to win, they still managed to destroy the ring, it would fall to Faramir to continue the line of stewards and rule the kingdom. But obviously, they have no knowledge that Aragorn is on his way, or they're going to win, or that there's any hope whatsoever. And so Denethor is basically sentencing the entire kingdom to utter ruin because there wouldn't be anyone to take over it, if that makes sense. And he's choosing to do that, even though there's no need. So, yeah.
It's like the idea that you've got a toy and you don't want anyone else to play with that toy, so you'd rather see the toy burn than literally allow anyone else to play with it. But that's a simplistic way of putting it for any listener or viewer who's not getting the explanation that Ollie's clearly outlined there. So we then have Pippin sprint off and try and retrieve Gandalf. Now, I don't know whether I've skipped anything here, but I think in the attempt to go find Faramir, so before they get to Faramir, they actually come across, I think, the Witch King.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that's later on.
No, it is that. It is on their passage up. So that's actually the passage I wanted to read from the book. So, because I'm not 100% certain on whether I like that scene or not.
Yeah.
Because the Witch King, it seems like he's about to overpower Gandalf and kill him. And Gandalf is a Maya, like he is an actual god in human form. And I don't know necessarily that Gandalf would actually be killed by the Witch King. I doubt very much he could take him on if there was more ring wraiths with him, or maybe if it was just a simple hand-to-hand, one-on-one without the dragon. He probably would be able to sort him out, I would say. And so I'm not especially pleased that he was made to seem entirely helpless. His staff broke and he fell off his horse, and then he just looked this sheer look of utter terror, and like there's no there's no hope. And then, I mean, it is good. I suppose cinematically, it's like the prince is dying, the steward is dying, the savior, which is, you kind of think of Gandalf at this point, the savior is about to die as well, and then the city's just going to be overrun, and that's that. And so cinematically, it's like a big build-up of how is this going to get any better, and then obviously Rohan appear. But that's actually the passage I wanted to read from the book.
Yeah, hit it.
So, so this is when when Grond smashes through the gate in the book. This is that moment. I try and practice my reading. I don't know if it's going to be really good.
Don't worry about it, man. You got this.
My throat feels a bit weird. So, in rode the Lord of the Nazgul, a great black shape against the fires beyond. He loomed up, grown to a vast menace of despair. In rode the Lord of the Nazgul, under the archway that no enemy ever yet had passed, and all fled before his face. All save one. There waiting, silent and still, in the space before the gate, sat Gandalf upon Shadowfax. Shadowfax, who alone, among the free horses of the earth, endured the terror, unmoving, steadfast as a graven image in Rath Dinan. You cannot enter here, said Gandalf, and the huge shadow halted. Go back to the abyss prepared for you. Go back. Fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master. Go. The Black Rider flung back his hood, and behold, he had a kingly crown, and yet upon no head visible was it set. The red fires shone between it, and the mantled shoulders vast and dark. From a mouth unseen, there came a deadly laughter. Old fool, he said, old fool, this is my hour. Do you not know death when you see it? Die now and curse in vain. And with that, he lifted his high sword, and flames ran down the blade. And in that very moment, away behind in some courtyard of the city, a cock crowed. Shrill and clear he crowed, recking nothing of war nor of wizardry, welcoming only the morning that in the sky far above the shadows of death was coming with the dawn. And as if in answer, there came from far away another note. Horns, horns, horns. In dark Mindolowine's sides they dimly echoed, great horns of the north, wildly blowing. Rohan had come at last. I thought that's a fucking beautifully written little moment, that it is like the great shadow has entered the city, and it's like there's no everyone has run away because everyone is so scared of it, and now there's a little slither of hope. So that's the passage.
I love that, mate. I think that's perfect. And I also think that what you said earlier about not liking, it makes sense cinematically, but the book there makes a passage which makes more sense to me. Gandalf isn't afraid. He was never afraid. He faced a Balrog in his lesser form. Gandalf doesn't have that, and his staff is given to him by the highest gods of Lord of the Rings. Like, it's a staff that embodies his power. So I didn't like that they shattered it, because number one, I get it, right? The Witch King is powerful, but it's the idea that Gandalf is just as powerful. And that passage there where he says white and shining, that idea that he stood there and he says, go back to the abyss. The idea where you were spawned by Sauron himself. It's the idea that he's not afraid of the abyss because he's been there.
Yeah, he's seen it, hasn't he? He knows what is coming for him.
Exactly. And more than that is that Sauron's a Mire as well. He's not technically a god. He is the same as Gandalf, except in almost a greater form because of the ring. But I think that the reason why it's in the extended edition and not in the final cut of the film is that, Peter also looked at it and thought, no, this doesn't make sense. Like, Gandalf is a strong character who it would lessen his sort of achievements in the past if we saw him cower before,
Yeah, definitely. Because there's like this look on his face that's like that. It just despair almost. There's no. Yes. It's not even like sadness. It's just like, oh well, that's it then. It's all over now. And I suppose you get the the same thing happens in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where the characters, their power levels, if you have some kind of graph or a bar chart or something, you'd have some characters' power levels that would be so far above anyone else's on screen that it would be impossible to actually portray on screen, and so they have to dumb everything down, and so it's fine, like it works with a camera, but the book, there's poetry in there. It's so beautifully well written. Yeah, I prefer the book version.
Yeah, I love that passage, and I'm glad you read that out on the podcast, because it does really give the listener and the viewer the idea that this was a really impactful scene. It was the pinnacle part of whether the darkness was going to take over Minas Tirith, or whether it was the light was going to balance it out and have some sort of, you know, repercussions to what has just happened. Because it looks like, to me, from there, that it's the end. You hear that scene, you're thinking to yourself, my God, there's no way we can come back from this.
Yeah, definitely.
And the horns of Gondor ringing out is just that beautiful, same as the Two Towers, where he says, you know, when my first coming, look to the east. It's that same
on first light of the fifth day or something, wasn't it?
And I think when you spoke about poetry as well, and the book being beautiful, I think this scene now coming up is exactly that. I think what we're about to talk about is probably one of the scenes that make me feel, you know, sort of pride for a country that doesn't exist. You know, it's like that sort of swelling up of like death, like, you know, that sort of like the end.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, you say this country doesn't exist. The Rohan, the people of Rohan were Tolkien's sort of representation of the Anglo-Saxons. So technically it kind of did exist. And I suppose if you're British, you technically are descended from the Horse Lords. But yeah, obviously it doesn't exist. But I actually have another passage I wanted to read.
Yeah.
There was it was this moment in the book when the forces of Rohan appeared.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
So in the book, when we hear the horns, the next chapter is obviously about Rohan arriving to Gondor, and they take a little while. They have to go through like a couple of back roads, because the main roads they would be taking have been barricaded by orcs and stuff like that.
Yes.
But they've been told by the scouts that the city is almost in ruin. Yeah. So they're like, they need to get a move on. So I'll read it again. It's quite long. We'll go for it. Yeah. Now silently, the host of Rohan moved forward into the field of Gondor, pouring in slowly but steadily. After a while, the king led his men away, somewhat eastward, to come between the fires of the siege and the outer fields. Still they were unchallenged, and still Theoden gave no signal. A smell of burning was in the air, and a very shadow of death. The horses were uneasy, but the king sat upon Snowmane, motionless, gazing up upon the agony of Minas Tirith, as if stricken suddenly by anguish or dread. He seemed to shrink down, cowed by age. Merry himself felt as if a great weight of horror and doubt had settled on him. They were too late. Too late was worse than never. So this is like if you imagine that the king in a battle is going to be like the shining light of what a soldier should try and be like. And even the king is like sat, he's like hunched over and not looking particularly pleased about the situation. And now the whole host of Rohan is kind of feeling that. Then suddenly Merry felt it at last. Beyond doubt, a change. Wind was in his face, light was glimmering. But at that same moment there was a flash, as if lightning had sprung from the earth beneath the city. For a searing second it stood, dazzling far off in black and white, its topmost tower like a glittering needle. And then as the darkness closed again, there came rolling over the fields a great boom. At that sound, the bent shape of the king sprang suddenly erect. Tall and proud he seemed again, and rising in his stirrups, he cried in a loud voice, more clear than any there had ever been, more clear than any there had ever heard a mortal man achieve before. Arise, arise, riders of Theoden, fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter, spear shall be shaken, shield be splintered. A sword day, a red day ere the sun rises. Ride now, ride to Gondor. With that, he seized a great horn from Guthlaf, his banner bearer, and he blew such a blast upon it that it burst asunder. And straightway all the horns in the host were lifted up in music. And the blowing of the horns of Rohan in that hour was like a storm upon the plain and the thunder in the mountains. Ride now, ride to Gondor. Suddenly the king cried to Snowmane, and the horse sprang away. Behind him his banner blew in the wind, white horse upon a field of green, but he outpaced it. After him thundered the knights of his house, but he was ever before them. Eomer rode there, the white horsetail in his helm floating in his speed, and the front of the first Eored roared like a breaker foaming to the shore. But Theoden could not be overtaken. Fey he seemed, or the battle fury of his fathers ran like new fire in his veins, and he was borne up upon Snowmane like a god of old, even as Orome the Great in the battle of the Valar when the world was young. His golden shield was uncovered, and lo, it shone like an image of the sun, and the grass flamed into green about the white feet of his steed. For morning came, morning and a wind from the sea, and the darkness was removed, and the host of Mordor wailed, and terror took them, and they fled and died, and the hoose of wrath rode over them, and then all the host of Rohan burst into song, and they sang as they slew, for the joy of battle was on them, and the sound of their singing that was fair and terrible came even to the city.
Wow.
Good. It's good.
Wow.
Yeah.
That represents exactly the clarity and sort of energy that they get across in the movie, in the sense that it is this horrible scene to see a burning city of, orcs just murdering and destroying and pillaging the West, and then to have their king lead them and say, "This is it. This is where we stand. This is where we fight." And that passage is exactly what that's really cool to see, that the words used in the movie represent the exact similar words used in the book as well. So that's
definitely. And obviously the film has the advantage of firstly being us actually being able to see what's happening, but it also has the music.
Yes.
And so the music is like this triumphant, battle, ride into battle, and the words are used there like a breaker foaming to the shore, because that's kind of what the horses look like as they advance forward, and they sort of charge into that like a spear point in the film,
yes.
don't they? And it's like, it's good, like it a lot.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned the soundtrack, because it also represents very similar to you were saying that he blew a horn. It's the same sort of do, and where the sun rises, and it gets louder, and you're like, it's as if the sun is rising, and it's like the music in the background is rising with that sun, and I love that. And I think you're totally right. And from that beautiful passage and beautiful scene that you've talked about there, we then cut scene again, and it's like, oh, we've got this just smashing huge battle that's the Rohirrim are towering in, and you see the orcs terrified because they've shot arrows and it's not working, and they get absolutely bashed to pieces.
They do, don't they? And it would be terrifying as well to be standing there with just like a spear or a pike, waiting for however many 100 or 1,000 horses charging at you. Like, that you're a goner, because there's no even if you stop the first guy, that your spear, you stop the first horse that gets to you, the next one or the next one or the next one is just gonna smash through you. So it was represented quite well, I think.
Yeah, because it's easy to say, I'll fight those horsemen, I'll do for the orcs, and they're just like, no, my friend, no, you wouldn't. You need a guy for that one. You need like thousands upon thousands of shields being put in front of another, and even then, it's an impossible task. And like I said, from there, just immediately cutscene to Dennithor, where he tries to burn himself, and technically succeeds. We then have Gandalf comes into there, right? And this is something I only noticed rewatching this today, was that Gandalf himself actually looks quite tired. You know, there's quite like red rings under his eyes. So I do like that idea that he's been fighting a battle. This would have worn on him physically. Like he would be physically knackered by this point.
Yeah, definitely. And they've been awake all night, haven't they? The sun is only just rising, and the battle's been going on for at least a day, hasn't it? So,
yeah, exactly. And so we've got like Gandalf, Ian McKellen with like red rings under his eyes, and he's like, "Stop this madness!" And it's as if like he's even in his sort of coherent tiredness, he's able to utter sense to the Dennithor, who is insane at this point, and he's like, "Nope, mine."
Well, I like what I like the atmosphere that the music creates here as well, because it's very like a dark, somber music, but it's also when Dennithor is speaking, he says like, "You may achieve victory on the battlefield for a day, but in the power that is risen in the east, there can be no victory," or something.
Yes.
And it's like he says it in time with the music, and so there's this sort of a beat to it, and it's cleverly done. There's power to it when he says it.
Yeah, and it reminded me your earlier statement of him looking into the Palantir. So how does he know that there's no victory in the east apart from what he's seeing
exactly.
at the moment?
Yeah, or how does he know how much power has risen in there?
Yeah, exactly.
But it reminds me of their first. I forget exactly which words it was now, what the actual sentence was. But when in the start of the film, when they're speaking with Saruman, there's a similar tone and there's a similar theme where Saruman is kind of speaking in time with the music, and so there's another kind of a beat to it. And I think that because it gives it a kind of melody, and that makes it more impactful.
Yes.
So yeah.
No, I think you're right, and I think it's bringing back the idea of poetry to the film, even though we don't have that ability to have the speech said. It's the idea that we've got the music in the background and the melodic sort of speech to try and improvise that, even though we don't have it. So I think that's well done, and it could, if they had actual poetry, it could come off as quite cheesy and ruin the tone of the film if they had it.
Well, there is quite a lot of poetry in the books, but
but you know what I mean. Like if they read out word for word the poetry within the books, it may sort of lower the impact of the words being spoken.
Yeah, definitely.
And from there, again, as soon as you have the sort of interaction and the rebuttal between sort of Gandalf and Dennithor and Pippin says Faramir, after that. We see this beautiful shot of, I know it's not exactly nice terms, but we see Dennithor sprinting off the top of the
he falls off the top, doesn't he?
He does, but it is quite a beautiful shot. Let's not,
Yeah, because you see the whole city, don't you?
Yeah.
And it's obviously it's gone up in fire, and it's a good shot. That I'm amazed though that he managed to run from the houses of the dead where they were all the way, because it was like a mile, and he was covered in oil. He would be pretty burned up by it, but not that it matters too much. But
no, I know, but you're totally right. The physics of it doesn't make sense, because he's running from all the way back of Minas Tirith to the front. You're like, no, it makes no sense. It's crazy. And then we've got, again, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, there is a lot of cutscenes where we cut from one scene to another. And this is definitely the next, I want to say 5 points here that I've got highlighted. The next bullet points that I've got written down are like one after another. So bear with me and do highlight if anything is out of place. So you've got Rohan triumphs, but the Ollie fonts arrive, and so this is a key point in the film, in the sense that even though Rohan's just defeated like a gaggle of orcs, they still have these ginormous, creatures to tend with. And Ollie, I like that you mentioned the soundtracks before, because the horn blown by the Men of the South is quite daunting. I don't know if you.
Yeah, it's kind of out of key.
Yeah.
And it's quite a striking sound, because it's like, although it's out of key, it doesn't sound wrong or like out of place. It just it's just strange sound. It's like a haunting sound almost.
It is.
I don't know if you remember in the Venom sound, the Venom trailer that came out 2 years ago, whenever it was, the film with Tom Hardy.
Yes.
The trailer had some off-key piano notes, and it gave a bit more impact to the trailer, and it's kind of a similar theme here, if you like. It's like something about it is wrong, and so yeah.
I had no idea about that. That's really interesting. I'm going to go away and rewatch that, because you'll be glad to know I'm actually I'm rewatching the Marvel universe, even though that's I started with Captain America, then Captain Marvel,
Nice.
and I'm working my way off. Anyway, that's a sidetrack, but you'll be glad to know, and that will
nice.
You never
that's
know,
cool.
guys. You might get a couple of podcasts on the Marvel universe down the line between me.
There's definitely a couple of films I want to do. I definitely want to do. I definitely want to in our future podcast. I definitely want to explore the relationship between Captain America and Tony Stark.
Yes,
because there's a lot in there, and yeah. But anyway, that's for the future.
Civil War alone. That's all we'll say. We'll move on from that. But yeah. So the men of the South, even though they're few in number, there's great strength there, and something that makes sense, but at the same time, it always annoyed me until I rewatched it today that I realised, the one-eyed, like crippled orc who leads the orcs.
Yeah.
Realise that Eowyn basically beats him to death and I didn't realise that she defeated him and the Witch King basically.
Yeah, she did all right. Yeah, she was the MVP of that battle, I think. Yeah.
No wonder.
And she took out
it's crazy.
She also took out a Oliphant, didn't she? Mammokill with riding the. Yeah, that was there. Yeah, she was good. There was deleted scene from the Two Towers where some of the Uruk-hai make it into the glittering caves in Helm's Deep, and she's fighting them. She defends the women and children in there. So yeah, she is a good warrior. That's like part of the. We don't really get to see it very much, obviously, but she's like supposed to be like this a very, very good warrior. So yeah.
Well, like brother, like sister, Éomer does a very similar thing where he throws the spear and he nails not only an elephant but the entire crew on top of it.
Well, he takes out two, doesn't he? Because the guy falls off, and then he's dragging the Mammothkill's ear into the other one, and then they both fall over.
Well, like you said, kill count is going up and up and up with this movie. Yeah. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And
I like the symbology, if you can say it, is that between the horse masters of Rohan and the men of the South who are riding the Mammokill, because the Mammokill and the horses, they're not obviously like well, elephants and horses are not predatory animals. They're grazing animals. They eat plants and stuff, and so they're pretty peaceful, relatively peaceful. And so the idea that the men of Rohan have sort of mastered the horses, there's like this kind of a symbiotic relationship where it's a gentle mastery. It's not tyrannical. It's not slavery, but it appears to be what the men of the South have over the Oliphants, over the Mammokill, is they've controlled them by like beating them, and they've also got the hooks in their ears and stuff. So it's like it's an involuntary relationship, if that makes sense. And obviously, they're not particularly. I'd imagine they're not particularly aggressive. Although I'm saying this, and elephants are known to rampage through small villages when they get drunk. That's besides the point. It's the idea that man has corrupted nature in a sense. Whereas
it has, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it does bring me back to some of the Greek mythology, where some of the Persians in Asia, the idea of slavery was awful, in the sense that with the Persian Empire, you'd have animals like that beaten to submission, and slavery was the same thing, where people served their masters. And even though the people themselves had their own land and stuff like that, Persia would invade and it would become part of Persia in the same sense. So I think the men of the South have a very similar link to that Eastern culture in that sense as well.
Okay, yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
And we lead on from there to a very beautiful little mini scene, mini cut, where Gandalf and Pippin are sat just on the, I think it's like the second layer where they're the sort of trolls are hitting the door,
Yeah.
and we have Pippin say, I can't believe this is the end. And Gandalf says, no, the end? No, this isn't the end. The journey just begins. And I love that. I love that he talks, we talked about this in the previous podcast. It's probably my favorite description of death put out there. Like this idea that, you go onto white shores, on a swift sunrise and a grand country. And it's also the scene around him, like there's mist, around Gandalf, a lot of white light, a lot of while he's talking, there's a lot going on. And Pippin's like covered in dirt, and it's, tears of, scared of what's about to happen. So I do really enjoy that. And
it's another moment
scene,
where, it's impactful as well. It's not a moment where Gandalf is being a kind of an ideal of sorts to it's the only person in front of him, which is obviously Pippin. The line is actually from in the Fellowship of the Ring. There is a poem. No, sorry, it's not a poem. When they leave Tom Bombadil's house, after they've just left the Shire, Frodo, his sort of inner monologue is that the grey rain curtain falls back and all turns to silver glass, and he sees white shores under a far green country, under a swift sunrise. And it's a good way of putting that into the film, because it's like this little intimation of heaven, and we know that obviously Gandalf has actually been there, so he actually knows what actually waits just around the corner. So
it makes it that more impactful, doesn't it? Because he earned his place there. He defeated the greatest evil that he could probably fight against, and smote him on the shores of the dungeon of water and fire. And then he went to heaven. It's this idea that he earned his place there, and that it's not the end. And like you say, it's short but impactful, and it really does remind you that even though Frodo's journey is going to Mordor and ending at Mount Doom, Gandalf does give that brightness that even if he does die, there's this sort of like there's this next afterlife there for him.
Yeah, definitely.
And from there, we previously saw that we said the extra scene where the Witch King attacks Gandalf. Well, now the Witch King attacks Theoden, and it's the most savage, absolute maiming of a character I've seen in this. Let's be honest.
Oh, it was, because he doesn't even engage him in battle. It's like he doesn't even get off his beast and actually fight him. He just picks him up and spins him around, throws him to the ground, kills his horse, and breaks his body underneath it. And it's when last time I watched it, it was like it hit me a lot, because it was so disrespectful.
Yeah.
To that's a king. That's a king of an actual kingdom. The leader of a race of men, of the men of the North, I think. And it's just thrown to the ground like he meant nothing. And not good, not very nice.
No, but I'm glad you said it was. It shows the sort of level of disrespect that Mordor has towards the race of men, and how they feel towards some of the characters within it. So it is interesting. And from there we see, it's as if the Witch King is like a being of pure darkness, because to me, he's just like, he does everything quite logically in the stance towards evil, and there's no emotion behind him. I don't know if you've noticed that. There's like, it's just like, I do as my master orders, and that's it. Like, there's not a lot of
there's no will of his own, is there?
Exactly. And he makes a lot of statements. There's no like questionability behind it for him. There's no question from him to others. So when he says no man can kill me, it's like no man ever has and no man ever will, and it's just that like just an ending statement. And then we have this I think it's quite funny, because to me it's like this great being of darkness gets taken down by a hobbit and a woman, and it's like this is just perfect to have this being who thinks he's above everyone else get taken down by people he'd class as lesser beings. And it's I don't know about you, but it does remind me a little bit of like Hitler getting taken down by Jewish people in the fight against the Nazis, in the sense that they class them as lesser, but they actually kick their ass.
Yeah, something like that. It's a good little moment as well, because in the book, again, to link it to the book, the reason that Merry is able to stab the Witch King and actually do some damage is because the knife he has was given to him by Tom Bombadil from the first book, and it's actually a magic. Him and Pippin and Sam all got one, and it's actually a magic knife. I say magic; it's not like it, it's enchanted, so to speak. Yes. So it's like I think it's elven made, and it was used in wars from a time long gone. But the reason it's able to actually do some damage is because it's not a man-made object. Although it does break Merry's arm, or it does hurt his arm. And then obviously Eowyn is able to stab him in the face, which he pretty much deserved.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah.
I love
he definitely deserved that.
Oh, dude. And more than that, it's like his entire face collapses in on itself. That's such amazing imagery. And that, this is the thing with the book, you can only get so much imagination from it, but Peter's like visualization of this destruction it's brilliant. And your mention of the magic knife, I think that's sort of, it says this cool connection, because when Merry stabs him, the knife disappears. So that's really, it could be that Peter saw that in the book and thought, well, we could have some sort of magical ending to the knife and see how it goes there. Who knows? I can't get inside his head and be like, yeah, that's exactly who it is. But, and from there you have Eowyn saying the badass line, "I am no man," and then bang, just so cool. And from there we have Aragorn immediately arriving with the army of
just before that. So Witch King is dead, and then Eowyn goes to Theoden in his last moments.
Thank you. Yes.
So it's like Theoden has been doubting himself for a long time now, because he wasn't sure if he had the courage or whatever it was going to take to take his army into battle and die with dignity without, not necessarily be without fear in the face of his enemies, but at least to die sort of upright, and and he does that, and he knows it, and so he can die. He says, "I go and ask the halls of my fathers, in whose mighty company I shall not be ashamed." And I think it's because in a lot of different cultures across the world, there is this idea of, I think I've talked about it before actually, the glorious death, the death in battle, and like how if you don't die in battle, you don't make it to heaven, because you obviously didn't take on a battle that was actually worth taking on. But obviously Theoden does, and he ascends to wherever his wherever the spirits of his fathers have gone. But at the same time, it now means that the king is dead. So there's no, theoretically, if Aragorn never turned up, there's no king of men anymore. And so now there's like, it's pretty hopeless. But then obviously at the very moment, Aragorn arrives and on the ships with his Deus Ex Machina army of the dead, and they win.
The OP, OP army. It always reminds me, and I don't know if you ever played this, but this sort of time reminds me so much of the Return of the King PS2 game, and because you defeat the elephants, and then the dead come rushing in, and they help you win the day. And it does remind me of that game, because it was epic, because it also came out in 2003. And
it was a good game. That I've actually got it here.
Have you actually? That's hilarious.
Yeah, I've got my PlayStation 2 and a little projector. So I've got the this 20-year-old game on like a 100-inch screen.
Dude,
So
the pixels, you can physically see them and pick them up and pull them back out.
Yeah, it's a good game actually. There's good replay value in it.
Yes, 100%, and it's also 2-player, which is also something that was it's missing in today's society. Very much so in the idea that we don't have much human contact, and therefore everyone wants to be online, and so it would be nicer if we had in-person stuff.
Definitely, it'd be good if they remastered it and brought it out on the newer consoles. That'd be really good.
That would be. I'd be so down for that. I'd be the first on the line for that, because it would be like that, or Lord of the Rings: The Battle for Middle Earth. Did you ever play that?
Oh yeah, the strategy game.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good. I quite liked Lord of the Rings Conquest as well. I don't know if you
that was fun. I enjoyed that. Not many people played that with me, so I
was. It's a shame really, because it was like it was the same style of gameplay as like Star Wars Battlefront.
Exactly.
You sort of had to go and conquer a little area and hold it and kill a certain amount of enemies and stuff. Yeah, it was good game.
Yeah. Anyway, again, off on a tangent. We're both terrible at this. So I'm sorry, guys. Keep talking about stuff we love, and we get distracted. But Aragorn has arrived. Yep, hooray! With an army, OP army, and I love Gimli's immediate line, "May the best dwarf win," when he's talking about like who's going to win between. It's just he's so funny in this part of the film. Him and Legolas, like there's a level of humor that can't be replicated in film at the moment.
Yeah,
so good. Yeah. And then obviously this is purely action scene really. So again, there's not a lot of meaning, but there is the idea of Legolas being the most graceful bastard to ever go on an elephant and slide down it and kill an elephant and the entire crew all in one go.
Yeah, no practice runs or anything like that.
Exactly.
He just did it.
I love that. It's like, I'm a first timer, but I've got this. I've got written down as well what you said earlier. I go to my fathers. Again, I love that you talked about that, because the idea of Valhalla is a very Norse mythology that's being brought in again by Tolkien. And within this film, it's really important because death in battle, like you say, is just it's just relevant in all of these deaths. For all of the kings to be known as a great king, you had to die properly like that. And so one scene that's deleted from not deleted but cut from the normal version but is in the extended is Éomer running to find Éowyn, like sort of, she's not dead, but he's like crying.
Oh yeah.
And I think
because he finds her sort of semi-lifeless body, doesn't he?
Exactly. I think that is a seriously well acted sort of piece of done by Carl Urban there, because it's so impactful. The screen, because no one else is talking. It's quiet, and like Gandalf's there, and he's sat in the midst of the dead, and they're going through the bodies, and it's very impactful because he's the only person, and you just hear the cries in the background. And maybe that was a little bit too real for audiences back then, so that probably why it got cut. But nonetheless, I think it's still impactful and still worth talking about.
Definitely.
And as well as that, you've got Pippin finding Merry, which is also a lovely scene. Gives you a little bit of a tear to the eye because it's so like I found you, brotherhood sort of thing in that way or another.
Yeah, and he was buried under like 15 orcs, wasn't he?
Dude, yeah, exactly. It's as if he's killed all of them, and then he's just like, oh no, better lay down and have a nap now. But it's a lovely moment, and I think that there's a few of those in this film, and a lot. I hear a lot of criticizers of the Lord of the Rings saying it's too emotional, it's too sort of non-manly, and I think to those criticizers is that you're not intact with your feminine side, and you need to really think about your life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something that can be said for a lot of things in this day and age. This is not you're not supposed to just be Gimli. You're supposed to also try and be Legolas as well. You know what I mean? It's like you've got a like an appreciation for beauty and whatever. Yeah, yeah.
I think your description of it in the last podcast where we talked about the diamond, or not the diamond, the triangle of Gimli, Legolas, Aragorn, they're all like little pieces of each other that when combined, you have this just sort of like the best representation of what we'd want to be as men when it comes down to being in society. So if you want to hear that again from Ollie, listen in the previous podcast and he does a fantastic explanation of that. And so all I've got here is the battle's over and we cut to Frodo awaking in the tower. Do you have anything else within that period of time?
Not that I can remember from the battle. That is pretty much it, isn't it?
Yeah. And what we will talk about in a minute, because I love this extra scene. It's between Faramir and Eowyn later down the line, you know, when she's being sort of nursed back to health, etc. I think it's a really nice sort of way to say that there is light in the darkness and love can be found even in sort of the darker places. But we'll talk about that later on. The next there's a lot in the next scene. It's one of my favorites. Again, bringing back the Lord of the Rings video game, is that when you play as Sam going through this tower, it's epic. It's so much fun. This is where we see the mithril. See, again, we bring it back. We're bringing this continuity in the podcast where we've gone from bringing why was he wearing it there but not there, but, you know, whatever. But it's now I've got it written down here, Ollie, and I want you to tell me whether I'm right or wrong. When I see orcs, I see two different breeds of orcs in this camp. Now, my immediate thought is that the Uruk-hai breed is the darker breed, where he says, I want the shiny shirt. And then you have the goblin breed, which is led by the sort of greener one who says, this is all going to the Great Eye. And I was wondering whether you had any greater detail on what types of orc they were, or whether it was just orc in the book.
I mean, nothing too specific. In the book, there are two factions, and one, as you said, is the Uruk-hai, and they're sort of physically dominant, and the smaller goblin-like ones are the, I don't know, maybe not necessarily more intellectual, but probably a little bit smarter than the just like pure brute strength kind of thing. Because obviously he says the shiny shirt, that's mine. It's like, it's not particularly good English, but then the other one is able to articulate himself quite well and says all of this stuff is going to the Great Eye, and then they also start fighting.
Yes. I think,
which works in Sam's favour.
Yeah, it does. And to back you up with your point there, later on in the film where we see Sam and Frodo get escorted into the group of Uruk-hai, orcs, like when they're moving to the Black Gate, the majority of the leaders who are like whipping the people into the squadrons of orcs are actually the goblin sort of orcs. Which would back up the idea that the smarter ones are more likely to be captains.
Yeah, definitely.
So, interesting. I've got written down here a couple of things. One of which I love the scene where Sam is going up the stairs and it's got the massive shadow, and you have the orcs and they think he's some sort of monster coming up.
Yeah.
So
well, in the book, you see a little bit more of the reason they're fighting, and part of it, well, I don't know, part of the reason they're fighting is this, but they basically say that the webbing that was wrapped around Frodo, the face has been pulled back, and they know that Shelob hasn't done that, so they assume that there is some kind of great elf warrior that's with him, or some kind of spy, and so they kind of have it in their mind that there is another warrior that's out there that's sort of hunting them in a sense. And so that's kind of why. So, yeah.
That's a cool detail. I didn't know that. Oh, there you go. I'm learning something. See, every podcast I learn something new, either with yourself or other people. But, you know, Mr. Dum Dum here likes to learn something on these podcasts. So, you know, that's how it goes. So, yeah. Sam's a badass. I got written down. Sam just goes through these Uruk-hai, climbs up the entire tower, and then says the most cool line where he says, not if I stick you first, where it's just, perfect Sam. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that sort of scene area. But...
Not really, but yeah, it's a good little moment. Yeah, they're like this face of pure evil is about to gut this child.
And the point of the shiny sting going through his chest.
Yeah,
killer.
That's good. Yeah.
Now I know you'll have something for this, because this is a really impactful scene in the sense that this is the first time we see Sam sort of persuaded by the ring. We see his hold. We've talked about this before in the previous podcast. Sam, up to this point, we've never seen him be any sort of different person. We've only seen him ever be Sam. And when he hands the ring back to Frodo, it's this sort of like, maybe I don't want to, maybe I do. And Frodo's like, I need to have it. But it is interesting. I was wondering if you had anything on that.
Yeah, just that I'm not sure it's the ring doing it. I think it's that Sam, in the book, when Sam takes the ring from Frodo, he realizes just how heavy the ring actually is and how much of a burden it has been for Frodo. And so he kind of understands at that point what Frodo's been going through. And he doesn't really want to inflict that again on his master. And so that's kind of what that is. So that's when, because he's holding it, and when Frodo reaches out, he comes back, doesn't he? He's like, "Are you sure? Like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?"
That's a really good way of putting it. I've always had that's a good perspective. That's made me rethink what I was thinking, actually, because up to this point, I've always thought that it was actually Sam thinking that he was going to take the ring for himself and be like, "No, I'm not going to give it back to you. Like, this is mine now," sort of thing. So that's a better way of putting it. And the fact that the book clarifies that, it's always good. But as soon as he gives the ring back to Frodo, he knows the mission. He knows exactly what's going to happen next. He's like, right, we're going to go. We're going to get you some clothes, and we're going to head straight to Mordor. And I like that. I like the fact that Sam was only, distracted for a moment, and then it's just bang, straight back into it. And Frodo's the same. And we start to see how much of an effect the ring has on Frodo in the next, 20 minutes of the film, because it's just... we start seeing scars around his neck from the ring's physical pressing down on him. I think that's fantastic by the makeup crew who did that, and that's epic. And we also see him just get more and more tired. It's interesting to see that. But apart from the tower, we again cutscene, bang, and we're back to Gondor, and it's the scene between Gandalf, Gimli, Legolas, Aragorn, and Éomer, where they're discussing what to do next.
Yeah.
And I love the, and you've described the sort of Minas Tirith before. This room, even though we've seen it with Dennithor in it, right? Up to this point, it had a very different look to it. It was whiter when we see Aragorn in it. Now, I don't know whether that's because of lighting or whether that's because they've done that purposefully, because the rightful heir to the throne is finally within the place that, he should be. I was wondering if you saw that at all, or if you had any thoughts on that.
I'll be honest, I didn't actually notice that. That's a new one for me. So yeah, I mean, it could be that because the king is actually in the throne room. Although he's not king yet, because he hasn't actually ascended to the throne. So yes.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because you have Gimli sat on Denethor's chair, this is my chair now, guys. No longer yours. But Gimli being Gimli again. And from there, Gandalf's quite this is the first time we ever see Gandalf sort of questioning the mission, because he thinks he sent Frodo to his death. He says that, doesn't he? I don't think we ever see Gandalf, apart from against the Witch King, in a sort of negative attitude towards what's going to happen. But then they come up with the ultimate plan, and the boys are back in town, ready to go, kick off to go kick some ass on the Black Gate. And as I've got, this is for all of the lads. There's a sketch done by How It Should Have Ended but where Lord of the Rings is done, and they say, "Hey Sauron, you suck," and that's exactly how they distract him in this scene.
That's good. That's funny.
But if you haven't seen that, do go look it up, guys. It's great. But the Sword of Elendil is impactful now because we see how Aragorn gets Sauron's attention with the Palantir that we've both been talking about up to this point. We finally see it again. Now, I don't know whether this is the one that Dennithor had or whether this is the one that sort of Gandalf had with him.
Yeah, I think in the book it is the one that Dennithor had. And I think Sauron, when Aragorn picked it up, Sauron was... No, actually, wait, I could be wrong there. I might have completely misremembered that, actually, but I think Aragorn actually looks into the Palantir remember when Pippin does in the Two Towers? Aragorn actually looks into it then as well.
He does.
And so that's him sort of announcing himself back to the Dark Lord. I'm trying to remember actually if that's what happens with the book, but anyway, yeah, I think it is just a generic Palantir, they picked up at Starbucks or whatever. It's just they know that the Sauron is going to be on the other end.
Exactly.
And I think the idea is to trick Sauron into thinking that Aragorn has the ring,
yes,
and that he's going to use it to try and defeat him. And obviously Sauron knows that couldn't happen. So yeah.
And we also see him show the Sword of Elendil, and then also at the same time, when Sauron shows him something, and he shows out Arwen dying, and it's this sort of, we see that it's foreshadowing because we saw in the previous film, a part of the film, we see the gift given by Arwen to Aragorn smash upon the floor, and we physically see it in this scene there. So it's all has come to pass basically that we thought would happen, which is kind of interesting to see that they do play with a lot of foreshadowing in these films, and it's interesting to see that they complete it, unlike some other films or some other books. Great Gatsby, I'm talking about you.
Also Game of Thrones.
Oh, Game of Thrones, there you go, you too. We'll never mention you again.
Never.
This is the extra scene I was talking about as well. So before Gondor is emptied, we have a nice little panoramic shot of Faramir and Éowyn within Gondor, and they talk about how in the dark times it's silent in Gondor. There are no voices. There's no one talking. It's just there's nothing. And I really like this idea that during the dark times, even in the darkness, Éowyn and Faramir find each other, and then there's also the idea that people can get back and the light can grow. And Faramir is the one who says this, seeing as he was nearly burned alive by his own father. That's quite a statement to make by somebody who's nearly been killed multiple times. So it's quite impactful as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's another like a kingly person who's been raised properly. Like he's wise in terms of action. Like he's a modern man, so he knows that you need to actually do stuff to live. But he's also got this sort of mythological underpinning of his ego and his ideals and his morality and stuff like that. So it's like Sam saying in the previous film, the great stories, the characters, they see hope where it appears like there isn't any. Something like that. And Faramir still has a lot of hope.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's really a nice little connection between the two there, because they're both characters who see good where, even though they've had dark times, there's still good there. I think that's important to say. And from there, we see Gondor emptied. Gondor's, they're going to the Black Gate and they're traveling there. And from there, we cut scene and we're back to Frodo and Sam again. And so this is nice now. There's only two storylines. There's only Frodo and Sam, and then there's just Gondor, Rohan, and the other group of characters. So it's quite easy to flip back and forward between the two now. Yeah. And this is, again, going back to what I said earlier, where they join the crew of orcs, which I find quite a fun scene. Like it's, you know, I know it's been cut because it doesn't really need it to be added in there, but it's fun to see, and it does show, you know, the Sam and Frodo especially. We see the ring really weigh down on him because he's nearly falling on the floor, and it's that emphasized further there. But yeah, I don't think I have a lot, that comes in that scene, but you know, it's fun to mention.
Yeah, definitely. It's in the books as well, so I think that's why they added it in. So, but they just they escape pretty quickly. So
exactly, you can just cut through that and get to the next bit. And then from there we see this is quite, again, one after another. There's so much going on here in these sort of scenes at the moment. Is where Sam says, like, he sees a star in the sky and he says, look, there's a light the darkness can't touch. And it's like, they're in Mordor, they're in the worst place on earth, they're basically in hell, you know. There's nothing literally worse that can go on right now, and Sam still points up and says, look, it's still good, you know. I like that. I don't know about
it's like, because they're in the when we first hear that the poem where it's, you know, one ring to rule the all, it finishes with in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, or where the shadows are. And it's like they're literally in the land of shadow. And Sam is still like, look, beyond what you can see, there is still the light. Yeah, like you say, that can't be touched by the darkness.
It's just, exactly. And it's relating, again, we get this consistency of relating back to the beginning of the story, relating back to stuff that we've seen. There is this consistency in the Lord of the Rings. There aren't, I mean, I talked about this in the previous podcast I did with the other lads, in the sense that the reason why Star Wars didn't do so well in the newer ones was because there's so many inconsistencies and the story doesn't connect back, and they just throw information in and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I think this is why the Lord of the Rings does so well, is that it goes back to its roots, it goes into the books, it really tries to take some of that out, and then it also makes meaningful statements that go back to messages we've seen before and are continued through that story.
Yeah, it doesn't lose its essence along the way, does it?
Exactly.
It doesn't try and create flashy, exciting moments. It sticks to the material that it's got. Yeah.
Yes, spot on. Love it. And from there, we see the eye spot Frodo. So Frodo, you know, he collapses to the floor, and it's this really kind of interesting scene for me, because I think to myself, like, this is the end. Like, he's been spotted. Surely you'd have like orcs sprinting or Nazgul sprinting towards him, but you know, it doesn't, because you know they immediately have the lads, you know, the crew basically roll up to the Black Gate and say, now look at us, we're over here, guys, come on. You know, we've got some stuff to show, so it's good. And this is a scene that you've referred to a lot, you know, multiple times. We've talked about this, the Mouth of Sauron, and I was wondering if you wanted to go into this a little bit, in the sense that
it's a good character, the Mouth of Sauron, because it's like, it's not Sauron himself, but it's just, like you say, just the mouthpiece. And even though the Mouth of Sauron is trying to convince the group, which is effectively the Fellowship, trying to convince them that they have failed and that the halflings, you know, died or whatever. It's trying to make them lose hope, even though Sauron hasn't won. It's still this sort of manipulative, use of language. In the books, it says that the man, it was a man, just an ordinary man who sort of knew like the ways of dark magic or whatever, and he had a name, but it's been forgotten by basically everybody. And I suppose it's like this sort of, you can imagine it's like an ideologically possessed icon of something bigger behind him, where the only thoughts he has, that none of it is original thoughts, it's all just what he thinks Sauron would want him to be saying. It's not anything, do you know what I mean? But 100%. It's good. It was a good actor. He played him as well with a good good voice. And I did like the line that what do they say? It's like, who could have known that one so small could endure so much pain?
Yes.
And everybody is like, whoa, we've not made the right decision here, because they obviously think that Aragorn has the ring, and they're going to take it from him once they've killed him. But to them, I suppose actually that would be the moment when the Fellowship realised that the Sauron still actually doesn't have the ring, and so there still is hope. Yeah. Anyway.
No, I think you're spot on, mate. I think you were right to go into that detail because, immediately after Aragorn's like, "Nah, mate, you're chatting shit. Let's lop off your head. Like, there's no more for you, sir. You're out of here." And I do like that. I love the idea that his words were super meaningful. Like they affected. You could see it on everyone's face. Like Gandalf had tears in his eyes. Like Merry and Pippin were like, "No." And they were physically looking like they were going to lurch forward, and it was kind of ironic that Aragorn doesn't say a word; he just moves forward, and then it's like, "Nah, you're gone," just head lopped off. And so, yeah, you're right. I think the guy who does the voice for the Mouth of Sauron, he killed it. He killed it, and he did brilliantly.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's even cooler. I know you said that the guy in the book was basically, a magician, dark sorcerer who had this sort of, he was speaking on behalf of Sauron. I did like the idea that the Mouth of Sauron didn't have any eyes. He couldn't see. He was blind because all he saw was Sauron, and that the eye was Sauron, and that all he had was a mouth that would utter, Sauron's commands.
Yeah, I suppose Sauron not having a body is the one who sees for everybody else, isn't it? I suppose. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. And from there, we are close to the fires of Mount Doom. This is like the final act of one of the final acts, I should say, to everybody.
One of many, yeah.
One of the many final acts. I love this little sort of interaction between Legolas and Gimli, where they say, "I never thought I'd die side by side with an elf, and how about side by side with a friend?" And I love that, because it's like, in today's society, we need more of like the idea of diversification, like in the sense that you can be friends with people who don't come from your same background, and this is like a really nice sort of example of that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we again switch scenes again, and we have this sort of immediate scene between going to Mount Doom and then the fight beginning, basically. And you have Sam asking Frodo, "Do you remember the Shire, Mr. Frodo?" And it's this sort of like, I'm sat in the dark, and all I can see is the ring of fire, and I see it with my waking eyes.
Yeah, it's like he's circling the pit, and all he can see is the drain that is fall down. Yeah.
It's madness, absolutely. And from there, Sam's like, he starts talking about the strawberries, and then Frodo responds with like this dark sort of abyss, like you're saying. All you're hearing is like, all I see is the flames, and it's burning. And it's like Sam's asking a nice question, and he just gets a retort of just pure fear, which is not great. But the best bit is, of course, Sam saying, "If I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you," and then he goes, "Come on," and just like picks up Frodo, lops him over his shoulder, and he just carries him up.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and then obviously that's when Gollum appears again, isn't it? Because Frodo is so broken, basically, he can't even fend for himself. But then obviously he gets a second wind of some sort, because he manages to run off and actually make it into the
thanks to Fireman Sam.
Yeah, literally.
Gives him that extra energy boost. He's just like, "Don't worry, Frodo, I got you back, bro. I'll just hit him with a rock." It's just how it is. At the same time this is happening, we have a beautiful scene because it's like it keeps just going back and forth between these, the two groups. And as before we see Gollum, we have Aragorn look into the Eye of Sauron, and it's like you hear a whispering in the background, don't you? And Aragorn looks back at his friends and he says, "For Frodo." It's like, yes,
charges in, and then you have that amazing music as well kicks in, and it's like a step above what the music we've heard before. Even though it's the same music, you have like this it's like they added in like some choir singing, and it elevates the whole music. It's like it's proper. It's like saying, like, look how heroic Aragorn is.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, look how badass I am. I'm going to have the entire soundtrack basically make me look better than I already am.
But there is that bit when they after they killed the Mouth of Sauron and they run back to the group, Aragorn gives his speech.
Yes.
And it's like Theoden giving his speech to the Riders of Rohan again. It's like Aragorn has been trying, he's finally king, and people are actually following him. Like a large group of people are actually following him, and like now is the moment for him to step up to the plate and unite them and be the shining ideal that they're supposed to follow into death. And he does it.
It's like Aragorn is. I think this is why he's better than Theoden, because he says. He relates to his men. He says, I can see the same fear that would scare the heart of me. Like, he relates to them. He's like, I can see your fear, and it would take my heart just as much as I see it with you. But we're going to fight anyway, because this isn't the end. And it's like, that's it. That's my king. We stand and fight.
Definitely, yeah. You'd follow him into battle, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. There's no doubt whatsoever. Just like, even if you knew you were going to die, at least you'd know you'd die for like a cause greater than yourself and a king who actually cares about you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's just, killer. And then from there, we see the fight begin, and we meet Gollum back at the top of the mountain at the same time as well, and get into that little scuffle. And then, like you said, Frodo gets that second energy boost, and he's like, "I'm a sprint," and then he gets to the top, and then Sam's chasing after him after he does a RKO out of nowhere on little Gollum, and it's a great scene. It's good. It makes sense, and we've got all of the ideals playing in the field right now, and
they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing, aren't they,
mate?
The ideals are fighting their polar opposites, Sam and Gollum and Aragorn and Sauron.
And then we even get the Eagles and the Nazgul. They come
into
play. And it's like, wow, this is the most. These are all the polar opposites playing right now, and it's like, wow, it's just a battle. A dichotomy, or just a juxtaposition, whatever you want to call it. It's good versus evil. And it's here, and it's happening. And once they, they've had their second energy boost, and it's like you hear Frodo say, "I'm here, Sam," and it's like the most daunting sentence that he says, isn't it? It's like this, like he's not happy, and he doesn't look like he's ready to drop it in the ring of fire.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, I think there's an element of the story which kind of suggests that whoever is holding the ring can't willingly destroy it. And so in a sense it has to destroy itself. And so for Frodo to actually hold out the ring and let it go, like it's actually impossible to do. And so in the last moment he finally succumbs to the ring, because obviously you imagine that's where it's made, so that's kind of like where it's at its most powerful.
Yes.
So the influence it has on him is at its strongest, and so he just can't take it. Pretty dark moment, because like Sam is looking at all like Sam is like he's left his home. They've been walking basically for like 9 months through fire and death, fighting orcs and fighting off Gollum, and he's rescued his master countless times. fought a fucking giant spider, and then at the last moment, it's like, are you seriously going to destroy all that? You're going to throw all that away?
Exactly.
And it's like there's nothing you can do about it, because it's like that's what it was destined to be. And then so Gollum comes along, and I think that the reason Gollum fell into the fire, in the book, Gollum is dancing and he falls in.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's like jumping for joy, and so and then he falls in, and I think it's because he swore on the ring when they first met him, that the ring then betrayed him because he broke his oath. Yes. And so that's the reason that, if that makes sense, because it's such a powerful object. If you swear,
there is that interaction with Frodo when he's strangling him, he says, you swore.
Yeah.
That's spot on, mate. I like that. That's really good. And because he does say, what are you waiting for? Just let it go. And that does sort of, it's so hard for him. It's like physically impossible, like you said. And it takes that sort of realization of having Gollum bite his bloody finger off to be able to understand that, to get to that point. And it is as if the light weakens at that point. Everything's going wrong. Like Aragorn's being beaten by a troll. Like there's, the darkness is winning. There's everything's possibly could go wrong is going wrong at the moment. And so it's not until the darkness of Gollum, his greed, that overtakes him. Ironically, the darkness destroys itself. Like you said, it's almost as if that happens. And I like that. I think that's makes more sense, that the darkness would destroy itself more than the light would do, because it's like that yin and yang, isn't it? The yin can't destroy the yang. It's like, it doesn't make sense.
And you certainly can't have one without the other. I think there's a quote from Martin Luther King, which is like, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that, or something.
Oh wow.
But obviously in this case, it's like, this is the source of darkness. Like this is where it comes from, bubbling up from wherever it actually comes from, wherever its source is. And so this is like, there's no light in here. The light, normally the light is above you, but here the light is beneath you. Do you know what I mean? It's like this, not very well thought out.
No, mate. No, it's good to talk it out. It's good to like get it through, because obviously this is a really complex idea. Because let's be honest, yin and yang was made far before we were born, mate. For thousands of years. So to even be able to comprehend the idea alone is difficult enough on itself by itself. And we see everything is nearly defeated. Gollum achieves the goal, but by doing so, he dooms himself. And I think that exactly sort of personifies what you were saying earlier, in the sense that it wasn't the fact that he won and he got the ring. It was the fact that he broke his oath, and the ring knew that, and that's why he was doomed, not because he didn't deserve the ring. And from this, I love that, Frodo doesn't let go, and Sauron's just destroyed, and we get that lovely scene for Frodo. It's like,
I liked it as well when the Tower of Barad-dûr was falling, and you see the eye just explode, and it's like this shockwave. That was cool. That was well done. The whole tower just gets blown apart.
Oh, it's beautiful representation, isn't it, of the idea that like the ring has such an impact that it destroys the eye, it destroys the land, it destroys all the darkness within this area, and the fires of Mount Doom destroy the Nazgul, and it's like this idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if the book mentions it at all. I can't remember. But what happens to the Nazgul in the book at all?
I can't remember. I think they do die.
Yeah.
Because their fate is bound to, because their fate or their will is bound to Sauron, and because he dies, then they die as well. So they go into whatever abyss they follow him into, whichever abyss he goes into. So
Makes sense. And it also, because like their power comes from Sauron, because it's very similar in the sense, isn't it? And they've been corrupted by that same power. Try to think of anything So that's the first ending, basically, because we see Sam and Frodo end up on the rock. They have their, sort of heart to heart. And
yeah, I like what Frodo says, that I'm glad it's you here with me at the end of all things. It's kind of,
I think it also, to me, I think Frodo, what he's saying there as well is that I wouldn't have been able to do this without you, because I don't think he would have. I don't think it's possible.
No, definitely not. And certainly, even if it was Merry or Pippin, it still wouldn't have been. That he wouldn't have been able to do it because they weren't nearly as strong as Sam was. Sam was who he was from the beginning right to the end. But Merry, Pippin, and Frodo go through several changes.
Exactly.
So it had to be Sam from the get go. Yeah.
Mr. Consistent, Mr. Samwise, the best, the legend. He's the true hero, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Well, Tolkien thought he was as well. He was the hero. Frodo, although obviously he bore the great evil for a very, very long time, and it took its toll on him. He did fail at the end.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things he was destined to fail anyway.
Yes.
But Samwise was the hero.
Yeah, and ironically, so was Gollum in his own way.
Yeah, and kind of a dark hero, kind of an anti-hero.
Exactly. But the last thing we see of Gollum is that he's actually, he's pushing the ring. He cares about the ring so much that even when he's in he's burning alive, he's pushing the ring up. Like it's so strange, and it's great representation. And Andy Serkis does a fantastic job, and I love the fact that he got all of this idea from a cat coughing. He got the idea of doing the Gollum voice from his cats.
Oh, right, that's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
The idea of a cat like convulsing, or Gollum, just like the idea of coughing up a furball sort of thing. It's great. Cool. And then the eagles are coming. Yay! It's just like there's the finishing of the first part of the film, and we've got 3 more endings to go, guys. And obviously we have this beautiful sort of light come in, which is really sort of nice to see the sort of representation of the darkness is gone. Let's get some light coming in. We're going to represent the darkness is over, the shadow's gone, and that the eagles can come into Mordor to be able to rescue Frodo and Sam. And ironically, I think you mentioned this before. There's a third eagle, for Smeagol. Yeah,
because I think Gandalf, because Faramir told Gandalf about Gollum, he knew, and Gandalf knew that he would have some part to play still. He was kind of hopeful that it wouldn't be totally lost. But obviously it was, and it's a shame really, because it was like the 2 personalities that kind of reside within Gollum's or within Smeagol's head. One of them was just a kind of an innocent being that was maybe not necessarily innocent, because he does obviously commit a murder basically straight away. The moment he gets to he murders his friend or his cousin. But at the same time, it was like this, he was literally fighting over the most evil artifact in the world. And so it's kind of like not necessarily forgivable, but certainly understandable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good to see that Gandalf still had that sort of like hopefulness in him, because we do see a lot of doubt at the end of the movie. So that's great to have that, even on the edge of darkness and the end of all things. And then obviously we have this beautiful scene that's all white lighting, all beautiful, like everything's, joyous. Everyone gathers together. There's laughter, there's merriment, and you have everyone healed up, dressed up, and sort of just
the reunion of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Missing one man apart from poor old Boromir. Which is it says a lot about the Fellowship, is that everybody, obviously 2 people died, one of which got reincarnated and came back, and so it's the idea that the Fellowship did endure, and it's quite impressive to see that all of these characters had this impact on the film to such a point.
Yeah, definitely. It's like they were the right heroes for the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Except I think if Boromir is kind of Faramir is like the Boromir that should have been.
Yes.
And so you could argue that the whole of the Fellowship did make it because you had a man there.
Yes.
But
That's actually so true. That brings back the idea of reincarnation, because like Faramir is like the reincarnation of what Boromir should have been. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, something like that, definitely. Yeah. So, but obviously Faramir's in the Houses of Healing, so he can't.
Yeah, exactly. And so we now have now come the days of the king, and we see Aragorn become the man we all hope he would become, and all good is returned to the men of the West, and it's this beautiful coronation and all of these things. I'll be honest with you, Ollie, for the rest of the film, I don't see huge amounts of symbolic sort of like meaning that I can see in all of these endings. There's a lot of love, and there's a lot of peace, and it's beautiful, and there's like all of these great things happening. But I don't know about you. It's just like we see the sort of like result rather than the journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. There's only two, aside from when they're at the Grey Havens and they're going to go across the sea. There's two that's worth mentioning. The first one is that Arwen is at the coronation, and so now that Aragorn has proven himself worthy, he is rewarded with his animal figure.
Yes.
The kind of the most perfect woman in existence, something like that you can imagine. In the book, when Éomer and Gimli first meet, Gimli tells Éomer about the Lady of the Wood, who's obviously Galadriel, and Éomer says that she's not the fairest. She's not, and Gimli takes great offence to that, and he says, it's something like, Éomer says, if I ever look upon her and I don't think she is the fairest in the land, you can take up your axe and we will fight. And then in the book, Éomer goes to Gimli and he says, I have a confession to make. And Gimli says, yeah, what is it? You might need to go and get your axe, because I don't believe that Galadriel is fairest in the land, because she's there for the coronation. And Gimli is just about to go off and get his axe so they can have a fight. And then Éomer says, I actually think Arwen is the fairest in the land.
Oh, that's a shout. Yeah. Fair play. What does Gimli say to that? I want to know.
He forgives him. He says, yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, I was about to say, can you imagine if he just like rinses on Aragorn's wife and just like, nah, she ain't as good as Galadriel.
Yeah.
That would be funny. But yeah, that is a very notable point. Exactly.
So that's the first one, and the second one is when Sam and Rosie Cotton get married.
Yeah,
it's the same idea, is that Sam has reluctantly gone away and proven his worth, and then he comes back and he gets the perfect woman, so to speak, and then I think they have like 13 children in the book.
Yeah, in the book they do. I heard about this.
They get busy,
insane, isn't it? It's like the Samwise Gamgee tribe just gets bigger and bigger as life goes on.
Yeah, they're definitely very busy for a little while. And so those are 2 points that are worth mentioning. And then that's pretty much it. In the book, Tolkien describes the future of the Shire and how it's going to be, and that Sam becomes mayor for 7 terms of 7 years each, or something like that. And then, obviously, at some point, I think it's 5. Yeah, Frodo says it's 5 years, doesn't he?
4 years. 4 years. Yeah.
4 years. Okay. So they're obviously going to the Grey Havens.
Yes.
And that's where Bilbo and Frodo are allowed to go and die in Valinor.
Yes.
It's like this kind of heaven on earth kind of idea. It's like they faced, or they bared up under the greatest load that anyone could imagine, and they did it relatively successfully.
Yes.
And so they were allowed, because of that, they were allowed to go and die in heaven. basically.
Exactly. No, it makes sense, and it also like they took on the greatest pain possible. I think that the ring is the greatest evil, and therefore we can say that's the greatest pain that's possible to the Middle Earth, really. And so it makes sense that they have access to heaven afterwards.
Definitely. There is actually, I just been reminded actually of a quote by Nietzsche. I'll just see if I can very, very quickly find it.
No worries. No.
But
This is good.
That's it. So Nietzsche said, "The way of pleasure and pain should be so closely connected that he who wants the greatest possible amount of one must also have the greatest possible amount of the other. That he who wants to experience the heavenly high jubilation must also be ready to be sorrowful unto death." So, and because they had experienced the greatest sorrow. Well, maybe not Bilbo, but certainly Frodo. They'd experienced the greatest evil they possibly could. That they were rewarded with. Not to belabor a point too much.
No. It's a good point, and I think that you can see the effects on Bilbo. Like you can see, you know, in the film, it's like there's this, you know, his face is just, he's old, he's he's decrepit, he's basically not there mentally anymore.
He hasn't been moisturising, has he?
He hasn't been moisturising. No, he is not. He's had a stressful life. And it's he says, "I want to go on one more adventure," which it does go back to Gandalf's idea that death isn't the end, and there is this beyond. And it is really nice that the film ends right, not with them at the Grey Havens, but with Sam and Rosie and their children. And to me, I think it's like, we end on the family. We end on the beauty of life, not on the beauty of death. And it's this idea that, this was what they were fighting for. This is, the ultimate good that we could get out of that.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's, it's a mythological kind of idea as well, that the family is the world in a sense, because if you can imagine that the world is made up of what everyone experiences, everybody had a mother and a father.
Yep.
And so the whole idea is that the family is paramount, and
100%. And I think that each part of the points we've made over this sort of like series of the podcast have gone into the repeated idea of the warrior, the magician, the lover, the king, and talked about family, and talked about the integral parts of strength, and different parts of how music can affect the user. And I was going to ask, what do you think is your favorite part of analyzing the Lord of the Rings films? Because we've this is it. This is the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. It's been I've listened and watched. I mean, I've watched the films this year alone, probably, I don't know, maybe 5 times, something like that each. So that's a lot of, that's like 70 hours of film. It's a lot to go through. But I mean, each time you get something new from it, something different. And I never ever get tired of hearing the music.
Yeah.
There was always it's the Shire music mostly, because it's like this idea of heaven, or heaven on earth.
Yep.
And it's just like a continual reminder that, like, sometimes life can be pretty bad and life can be pretty hard sometimes, but most of the time it is worth it.
100%, mate.
If you just get through
I think you'd be proud of me. When I was in the Shire in New Zealand, the real one, I did play that music when I was there, and I did that for all of my Lord of the Rings fans to sort of like, this is it. This is the real. There is a real piece of heaven on earth, and it can, you can go there. And I don't care what anyone says. I recommend going to New Zealand because it is just, it's beautiful. It's lovely. And I think that you're right, mate. I think the music does bring you back to places like that. It does take you back to that sense of peace and joy, and removes you from some of the dark times in life.
Definitely. Yeah, who knows? One day maybe we'll end up in New Zealand.
Yeah, mate.
Laugh.
Yeah, and then New Zealand sponsor us. No, I'm joking. I think that yeah, this is a great way to end the podcast and great way to end the series, because we've gone through all of the films. We've talked about. I'm so glad that you've read the books really in detail and given me some of these passages to have in the podcast as well, because I'm going to listen back to them, because it's nice to just listen to having someone else talk through these sort of, really important passages that are written by somebody who clearly had good intentions in literature for people who he wouldn't ever meet and for people he wouldn't ever know, and would have such an impact on them. And you know what, mate? It's been a great journey with you. I'd like to thank Ollie Deacon. So straight up, mate, thank you so much for doing this with me.
No worries at all, mate. It was my pleasure.
Oh, legend. And we're going to continue this journey later on, and we're going to step into the world of Batman for those who are interested. Ollie's smiling right now because he's thinking to himself, yes, this is where I truly shine. This is where I become
the huge Batman.
Yeah. And we've had a great time doing this. I've had a fantastic time going through the Lord of the Rings with Ollie, and couldn't have done it better with anyone else. So thank you so much, mate. And this has been a Taylor's Tales podcast. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and this has been the Lord of the Rings series. Thank you so much.